In regards to the one-dimensional classification of a handball, it is considered an open skill due to it being affected by a constantly changing environment in the form of your position, position of opponents, and your teammates and playing conditions. When it comes to gross or fine motor control classification, the movement sequence involves large muscle groups to initiate the skill in the form of legs, arms, and back muscles, classifying as a gross movement. To further add, the movement sequence has a clear beginning and end point in the form of ball contact and release, and therefore is seen as a discrete movement. When it comes to Gentile's two-dimensional taxonomy classification, the skill was regarded as being 2B. This is due to object manipulation taking place by changing the position of the football in the skill, body stability being stationary when handballing to a target, inter-trial variability being experienced when handballing to a target at various positions on the field, and stationary regulatory conditions being experienced due to the skill being performed to a stationary target. When it comes to the aspects of the handball, it's important to recognize the three major components of the sequence: preparation, contact, and follow-through. In the following video, we demonstrate these components. We utilize Parrington, Ball, McMahon, and Taylor's principles of the mechanics of the movement to explain it to our participant. Preparation. Clenching your fist with your thumb on the outside to prevent injury. Arm bent back slightly behind the back. Ball cradled in platform hand at waist height, and opposite foot forward to punching arm. Contact. Forward momentum towards the target. Ball tilting up to spin backwards. Punching through with your clenched fist and steady head towards the target. Follow through. Transition weight to front foot and punching hand following through towards the target. When it comes to pre and post testing, we provided both qualitative and quantitative tests to assess the participant's performance. The quantitative measure will include 15 trials to a stationary target 5 meters away with scoring zones to calculate a total score. The qualitative measure will involve a subjective assessment of the components and execution of the skill regarding the key sequence actions of the movement, grading each part of the skill out of 10 for a possible 30. A post-test will then be completed after training has finished and incorporate the same protocol as our pre-test. 2 weeks after training has commenced, a retention test will then take place with no training to be completed and assess how accurately the participant can perform the previously learned skill. A transfer test will finally be created to determine how effectively the participant can implement the newly acquired skill in a game-like situation, involving handballing in varying conditions on the ground and with a defender. In the initial cognitive stage, it's expected to last 1 to 2 weeks, with the participant to experience high amounts of error. They'll be learning kinetic and kinematic properties that define the handball skill being learnt through observation from others, verbal feedback from a coach, and sensory feedback through physical practice, while also being unable to determine what they did wrong or how to correct them. They will need basic, specific instruction and feedback during this phase. The associative stage, by week 3 to 6, is expected the participant to understand the basics of the handball skill, refining his skill and experiencing fewer errors, while modifying and adapting to new situations and understanding how the various components interrelate. They are expected to understand how the hand placement of the ball, forward foot, and contact with a clenched fist interrelate to the handball motion. The autonomous stage, the final stage of learning in week 6 onwards. The movement of the handball becomes automatic and performed consistently in various situations. Less errors and learning slows down in this section. The participant is adept at using the handball and can focus on gameplay, environmental factors, and multiple tasks such as running with the ball and marking and handballing. Through mastering a movement sequence of one skill, learning the components of the second skill becomes easier. By understanding the similarities of the first skill, a coach can ensure the key actions of that movement can be transitioned into another. When it comes to the volleyball underarm serve, it incorporates the same movement patterns of the handball, following the arm bent back with the clenched fist swinging forward through hitting the ball, being a relevant skill to transfer. Within the refines of practice, high-frequency, short-duration sessions were implemented in a distributed fashion, which has been shown to have high amounts of retention. Utilizing blocked practice is preferential when compared to random, due to the learner being a beginner and may not be able to effectively handle randomly distributed sessions. The skill was classified as low in complexity and highly organized, incorporating one motor program and a synergy of the movements. We provided whole program sessions throughout the entire program as the movement was not complex enough to break down. During week 1 and 2 of the training program, the objective is to develop a baseline understanding of the skill. Verbal cues will be used to instruct the learner. These cues provided will be movement and performance related, drawing attention to the necessary components of the movement and stimulating cognitive activation. In regards to handballing, these cues include grip ball, plant foot, and swing arm in an accurate and concise nature to ensure no confusion. We'll be providing demonstrations of the handball kicking and marking skill sequences prior to practice and throughout when necessary. We aim to stimulate observational learning by emphasizing the correct movement patterns in the skills and ensure the observer can replicate and solve their own movement errors. By performing the skills, the participant gains implicit learning through sensory feedback and develops a deeper retention of how to perform the movements correctly. Augmented feedback is given after to promote modification and relate to the performance information. This could be concurrent feedback cues during the movement and terminal feedback cues after the movement. Knowledge of results and knowledge of performance feedbacks are also included in augmented feedback and relate to outcome, performance, and information of the movement respectively. Knowledge of result example is if the handball hits the target, giving a quantitative outcome, and knowledge of performance example is if your arm is not bent when handballing. Augmented feedback is useful when a learner cannot understand intrinsic feedback and can aid performance. However, it is not always useful when observation, intrinsic, or modeling is attainable to use and is understood. If too much of it is used, the learner becomes dependent on augmented feedback, ignoring intrinsic feedback and reducing their performance. Guidance hypothesis relates to this decline in performance. When the learner becomes too dependent on the knowledge of results, blocks out the use of intrinsic sources of feedback, avoids using alternative strategies, and formates maladaptive short-term corrections that are detrimental to positive adaptation. To avoid this, fading of the knowledge of results and performance will be implemented after the initial couple of weeks to avoid the learner being dependent on external feedback and move towards intrinsic. Within weeks 3 to 4, the objective now is to start transitioning the movement skills from stationary to moving targets, focusing on distance awareness and accuracy causing multiple inter-trial variability. When it comes to attention and memory considerations, transitioning short-term memory into long-term memory can be facilitated through rehearsal of the movements and verbal cues. Also of note, by drawing attention to one facet of the entire skill can assist in the promotion of transfer of short-term memory into the long-term. Attention focus in the initial stage should be narrow in an enclosed environment to allow focus on performing the skill and be comfortable performing its components. In the later stages, the learner requires less attention to perform the skill and should be practiced in a more open environment with a broad focus, developing comfortability in various situations of the skill and focus on the other aspects involving other skills and external factors. In the final 5 to 6 weeks of training, the learner is able to start implementing multiple components of the movement in a game-like situation by handballing, marking, and kicking while running to a moving target, and integrating all components of the skill in unison. It's important to promote intrinsic and extrinsic motivation to keep the learner focused. Promoting intrinsic motivation is more relevant because it lasts longer. Extrinsic motivation can be used in a reward-punishment fashion by rewarding good behavior with treats like lollies and punishing bad behavior with push-ups, making the learner want to change his behavior. By practicing variability, you're able to improve the capacity to execute the different skills in future situations, develop greater transferability, and have more initial error, therefore increasing retention. You can vary this by practicing different variations of the skill and change the physical context the skill is performed. Varied non-regulatory and varied regulatory conditions should be included for the learner to adapt to new situations, including defenders, various weather conditions, and various distances to perform the skills is in order to affect the ability to perform the skills.